we need to send Joe Biden some reinforcements. Because he can't do all those things with a 50-50 Senate. He's not going to get any help from any Republicans. Now, when you need reinforcements, what you usually say is send the Marines. I got a different idea. I want to send the Navy. And the bad news is we can't replace both of our U.S. senators this year. The good news is we can replace one of them. And we've got the guy to do it. A guy from Northwest Iowa, a guy who knows what it means to work on a farm, who knows what it means to work in a meatpacking plant, who has served this country honorably in uniform for 40 years, worked as an aide to Ted Kennedy, so he knows that institution and how it works. Let's welcome our next U.S. Senator, Mike Franken.
Well, so that the senator took everything I had to say, so I'm ready to take questions. Firstly, thank you, Maggie, for letting us use this facility. I know your husband's coercing you to do so, and thank you for doing it. This is the third event I've had here while I have this newfound occupation, and I'm very pleased that every time it's gotten progressively bigger, and the audience is, you know, the old bit about it takes a village, that's what you're seeing happen here in Story County. So thank you very much to rally the forces of this village to get me elected. All right, great. So there was a time when it was a difficult foray to get bump Chuck Grassley. People said, don't do it, Franken, it's not going to work, come on. But after January 6th, Tom Harkin and a few others said, come on, Franken, come on. Has to be done. It's a continuation of service and all the rationale. And they're all right, 100% right. So we go through these gates of yes or no. And I believe that if you really just want to run for office, it's probably not good enough. It's got to be a duty. It's going to be like Ross, rocking up, okay? If you've got the experience, if you got the education, if you've got the health, and if your spouse says, okay, Jordan's here, and if it really needs to be done, it's better than learning how to play pickleball really well. It's better than making $1 million as a corporate CEO. It's better, it's more meaningful, and we need this desperately. Chuck Grassley is not the person, he is not the person we elected. That change, that mutation occurred over the course of, well, 1 year less than me, 63 years. And it's continuing that way. The other day in Palo Alto, California, or correction, Palo Alto County, Iowa, he said, the reason I'm running again is to finally pass the balanced budget amendment. So I immediately called Tom Harkin's old office mates and I said, what do you make of that? Well, that's kind of a new thing for the guy. But this is where we are. I mean, he's always a one more reason to run. And I believe that what we have now in our senator is someone who at one time believed that something was better than party, but he is now a party hack. I'm not going to stand for that. I, for one, will never be subscribed to a party exclusively. I am going to Washington to represent you. This country, it's a continuation of 39 years of service. And I will not be contorted to what someone else says we must do. I want to support us. And I will be a progressive Democrat and a person who leans forward and gives us a positive business environment and a positive education environment and the type of health care that my wife and I and our kids enjoyed for almost 40 years. The type of health care that everybody should have, the type of elder care, the type of women's rights that the military observes, and reproductive rights the military observes. I will be the one who will never hazard your children, your grandchildren in unnecessary conflict. I guarantee that. And as the senator was just reiterating, there's many reasons why people said, well, don't run for office. It's not a good time to be a Democrat. Actually, it's a great time to be Democrat. Everything that gets polled polling in the state of Iowa is expressly in the center lane of Democrat desires, from human rights issues to a more energetic economic policy, to gun rights, responsible gun ownership issues, to immigration, et cetera. We are in the sweet spot where the rest of America is. This, as Representative Jim Leach said a week ago in Iowa City when he stood up in a large group, much like this, it's not whether we'll win, it's by how far the margin will be. And your sweeping of this Senate race means you're going to go to Washington with 3 Democratic congresswomen. And we need to really work so that we can get your reporting back to the governor and say, Governor DeGier, we're making it happen for you in Washington, D.C. And in the military, you feel a thing called sea change, and it's the movement and things of the environment and the ship and what's going on around you. You sense these things. And it's not so good for an engineer, physicist, for me to be in this sensory element, but it's a true thing. And as I go around Iowa, we started out this most recent, in essence, 4-day road trip at about 58 events in various counties, in all the counties. We're now in the high 80s. So we've done a few. And the audiences, in many respects, the person I most fear in the audience is not a loudmouth Republican, it's the fire marshal. Because that fire marshal is wondering why all those cars are at the public library and why we're all crushed into this room, because the librarian has said, as reported to many people, we've never seen so many people at the library. And as one of the librarians said as she's locking up after us, when Chuck comes, nobody shows up. And the bit of anecdotal information is when we lay out signs, and I can tell in the audience where the Republicans are, because the manner in which they look at me. And we'll say something that'll gather somewhat of an applause, and from them I get maybe a hesitant, like a golf applause, right? But when they leave, and half of them picking up a sign and walking out the door is anecdotally a good news story. And these signs that we have are made of plastic. They don't work well as targets for gun shooting. And I make sure people know that. These are signs to put out in your yard, and that's where they're going. And I want to thank the person up on Duff Avenue with my sign on the yard. Thank you very much. So this is what we're getting from the street. Our get-togethers are packed. There's a sense of forlornness in the eye in some of the rural counties. That has to be rectified by a more uplifting aspirational message. And our message is, let's talk about economic development, education, healthcare, how to get the 18 and 24 and 36-year-olds to at least consider coming back to Iowa. And a more energetic energy grid, and a more farm to table, working the agricultural aspects, and doing what we can to make us the center of R&D, especially Iowa State. And I'll do what I absolutely can. We have some senators, too, who have a tendency to not energetically, with a high level of vivaciousness, go after jobs and work. They are rather sedentary. I guarantee you I will change that. Unfortunately, I spent a lot of time in Washington, never by my own desires, but I know how things work in Washington. I know how to get the appropriations and the authorization bills passed. And I will go to work on day one helping this state and helping us all, and ensuring that our grandchildren at least consider staying and building out the population of this state and the energy and the jobs. Yes, ma'am, you included. Okay? All right. So thank you. Ross, we're on your team, just so you know. Hint, wink, wink. All right. And I've been traveling around the state with John Norwood, who's our ag candidate, And I'm doing everything in my power to look at other candidates on the ballot and bringing them up when I'm available. And taking that extra drive in the evening and appearing on stage and doing the social media. You could all very much help me by advertising this on your social media. And just so you know, from a donation perspective, we have outraised Chuck Grassley both of the last 2 quarters by a factor of 2. His burn rate last quarter surpassed his intake. And he's now bringing Vice President Pence in to do a campaign thing for him. He seems to have suddenly developed a relationship with Vice President Pence that's more favorable to Governor Pence. We shall see. And that's probably a harbinger of where he stands. His $54,000 spent on a survey, nothing was released from that survey results. And that was 3 weeks ago. Not a word, not a single missive, which tells me it probably wasn't favorable. So depending, as of 3 weeks ago, it depends where you think we stand, 8 points down or 4 points down. My sense is it's considerably less than that. My job is to get from 70% name recognition in the state to get somewhere in the 90s and beat him by a long margin that permits us to get a writ of work to go to Washington, D.C., and I thank you for your efforts to make that so. Thank you much. If we can take 5 or 10 questions, that would be terrific, and I'll do my very best to be quick about this. Yes, miss.
My name is Williams. I'm from Alabama. I moved here a year ago. When I heard that you're raising a son with disability, I can definitely relate because I too am the single mother of a child who's double disabled, autistic, and ADHD. So my concern. Oh, by the way,
It's okay.
This is my son. This is Derek.
Oh, nice.
That's why,
Jared?
Derek. That's why I am entering back in political science.
Okay.
And I hope to someday run for Senate in Virginia. And I want to inject a new generation of Congress. I want to inject a new generation of Democrats, Republicans, Independents to be bipartisan again. So we don't have to fail in a way our predecessors did. So my question to you is, concerning special education, how can you make that in a way where kids like my son don't feel like, well, oh, I'm disabled, I'm autistic or dyslexic, and I don't feel like I'm smart enough.
Right.
And I've noticed that in public education.
So Ms. Williams said her question involves special needs children and how to ensure that they're contributing members of society and have human dignity, correct? Yes, sir. Yeah. That's a good one. So I talked to Tom Harkin about this and how this ought to be part of the ADA and how it ought to be, and how it, with an exclamation point, says that we shouldn't be using public funds for parochial schools because our daughter would never get in a parochial school. And how in America, so my wife and I moved all over the place, many times, 20-some times. So we would not have been able to raise our daughter if we didn't have the health care afforded by the U.S. military because of the international moves, et cetera, the new IEPs and the new doctors and the medical and this and that and the medications and the operations, et cetera, which were generally taken care of. Every American ought to have that. And we ought to relish the opportunity for those who are different among us and grow their capabilities to a contributing level and make them happy and ensure they're happy. And I think our daughter's very happy. But she has a life coach, she has a job coach, she's gone through off-site training, she's gone to camps to ensure she knows how to do these things. She's had 3 major surgeries to rectify things. She's happy. It's what everybody ought to have. Okay, we'll talk about it. Next, please. Yes, sir.
Could you say something about Vote Vets, the organization which has endorsed you?
So, okay, so I have a pretty deep understanding of international security affairs. From East Asia to South Africa to north of the Arctic Circle, a large swath of the earth. I've spent a lot of time. At one time, the senior military officer on the continent of Africa and cooperative threat reductions and conventional arms reduction issues in Central Asia, east of the Urals, etc. I understand that region reasonably well, and I read Putin wrong. I did not think he was going to do that. So I developed a back and forth with Colonel Vindman. And he and I bounced things back and forth, and he said he's going to do it. And I said, you've got to be kidding me. There's no geopolitical, religious, racial, historical reason for him to do something like this, or economic even. He did it because he's an insecure little man who wants to bring together the old appendages of white Russia. So Vindman was right. In the course of these conversations, I did a survey for Vote Vets, and it's just a large veteran organization that is concentrated on more progressive causes for veterans and national security experts. And lo and behold, out of the blue, they endorsed us. And Vindman did as well. And also, soon to be released, this international consortium of diplomats and aid workers and a large collection of past military officers, general officers, etc. People who are progressively minded, liberally minded, but also contemporary. Not the group that endorsed Donald Trump. Not the people that had an upset issue associated with an administration of past, usually in the Obama administration, or someone who was born in 1934. And that's the other group. These were people who are past an opening, as we say in the Navy. This is the group that is the future of America. And as guys like General Mattis, when I told him, General Mattis, I'm moving to Sioux City, Iowa. And he said, well, that's a good deal there, Mike. You can attack in every direction. He's actually on our side. And so is people like Petraeus and Stavridis, et cetera, et cetera. They're on our side. They want to see a more progressive Iowa. So these veteran organizations, they're on our side. And we need to, I think my winning of this race will bring in a cavalcade of aid workers, senior aid workers, government workers who have just so far seen running for office so noisome that they just didn't want to do it. But we will break the mold and say, you know what, we told Washington, D.C. to stay out of this race. I'm the first candidate coming up as your Senate candidate who was not chosen by Washington in the last 4 Senate races. Did you know that? And we don't take corporate PAC money, we don't take dark money, and yet we still surpass the hundreds of thousands of dollars and the Chuck Grassley $1.4 million from the pharmaceutical industry. And that's why he's going to vote against the Inflation Reduction Act, because it allows us to bargain on pharmaceutical prices for Medicaid. That's just mark my word. I've seen the letter that they've sent all the senators, and it's got his name all over it.
He posted that today.
Oh, you did?
That he's going to vote against it.
Very well. So when he brought his own pharmaceutical bill forward in 2006, this is going off subject, the Des Moines Register titled it "Worse Than Nothing," which usually to me is not high praise. And so he's continuing that. He says one thing and does another. He's sending articles out, they're advertisements in essence, but they're articles, they look like articles, written by pundits that say all of these real mainstream things that he's for. And it's fallacy. It's absolute fallacy. It's a cover story to a more nefarious story. It's unbelievable. If you think this is going to get a little ugly, it probably will. And as Patty Judge told me, Franken, you used to be a boxer. You know what happens the first time you knock him down. Don't let him get up. So most recently he tweeted that he's really disappointed because Schumer made him stay another week in office, and he's missing his family reunion. So today, I had 2 staffers just happen to be in New Hampton to look for a location. The cone of silence is upon us, okay? This may not be leaked because we're gonna do an event up there. And they're looking for a stage, okay? And they happened to ride by the Grassley house after I told them to. And guess what's going on? A family reunion. Guess what their characteristic of that family reunion was? Small and inconsequential. But he had the audacity, I think, the blindness to say, doggone Schumer's making us work and I'm missing my family reunion. So I tweeted back, you know, try telling your 4-year-old that, you know, you'll see her after kindergarten. Or that do a year-long deployment next to a burn pit. And then let's talk about this. You're a public servant. Do that. Be a servant. Be a leader. Shut the hell up. Next question. Sorry. Next question. I'm full of vinegar here after like 30 events in a couple of days. A little bit bedraggled, but yes, ma'am.
Chris Cowan. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about U.S. arms sales overseas and its connection to human rights overseas, and how you see that working out.
So the question is, remark on international arms sales. It's called security assistance. That's the code word in government, and how that pertains to human rights and civil rights. Let's include that on international affairs. So arms sales are done in accordance, if it's done in normal business. Trump did not do this in normal business, you should know. And in times of conflict, no administration does. Like for Ukraine, it went out of normal business. When it's done in normal business, I know these things because I was the J5 at U.S. Central Command for a long time and was involved in other places in East Africa and also in Asia. Regionally, you propose how you're going to brace up countries and what the systems that you want to give them. You're very careful not to give people offensive operations because inevitably we do that badly, more than you want to know. But what we also do is tag them to ensure that they don't do what's called EJKs, extrajudicial killings. Never a good look on a nation. Ask the Saudis. Ask Putin. And I won't name any more names, but I know those people and have had to go to heads of state and say, we're intercepting your telephone call. You should know that we know you did that and we won't do any more operations with you, so you know. Which is a very unpleasant conversation, but I've done that in some places. We have been the international arms merchant of choice as a nation. I would offer that we should be more focused on logistics needs, hospital needs, and air transportation needs, and less on means to destroy. And I got to be careful what I say here, but there is a situation where I offered that for an entire year with the big spending money that the only thing we ever sell them are unarmed Huey helicopters. Because they can be used for so many multifaceted affairs and usually not for offensive operations against their people. But we usually tie conditions to what we sell. Now, if the next condition comes up that Israel And that's a true thing that we should talk about. But it's a long-term conversation, and we probably shouldn't get into it here. Okay? Thank you. Sir.
Yes, sir. James Billings. Could you explain your position on immigration, please?
Okay, well, a couple of things. Did you know, let's clear up a couple of misconceptions, and you're probably very much aware of these. But most of the people who are undocumented today are visa jumpers, people that overstayed their visas. They're not people who came across the border, or as Steve King used to say, with cantaloupe calves. They're not at all. 5% of them are Canadians and 5% of them are Europeans. And 2007 was the high point for illegal immigration in this country. And the president who adjudicated and sent back the most illegal immigration individuals was who? Was Obama. It wasn't Trump. Trump was gloss over. I'm a big fan of enhanced legal immigration. My perspective of immigration goes from understanding the villages from where they came, visiting them, from northern Nigeria to Bangladesh to Sri Lanka to you name it, and seeing how they're abused on the pathway, and the coyotes change things and cheat them and sell them, and how their labors are used for terrorist activity. Many of the people that we've gone after, we found in the points of departure, sea and air, for illegal migration, just so you know. It's a criminal enterprise of large proportion. I want to see a comprehensive immigration plan that gives a path to citizenship of people who are undocumented here now, much like the 2013 plan. For the DACA people, stop it, of course. And to ramp up those people for visas so that hardware stores and milking operations, small milking operations, and other means of viable employment, universities have these people available. Have the next generation available. In walking into my office the other morning, I ran into a guy, and he has the characteristic scars that come from an area in Niger, south of Agadez, tribal marks. And I said hello to him, and he's with a heavy French accent. He says, "Hello, Admiral. I understand you've got some experience in Africa." And I said, "I do as well. I do indeed." And he says, "Let me introduce you to my sons." His English is difficult. And I said, "Hello, young man. How are you? What do you do?" "Sir, I just graduated in Iowa State in electrical engineering." "Well, nice to meet you. How long have you been in this country?" 6 years. "Well, doubly nice to meet you. Welcome aboard." And then his same look, a little bit shorter. "Hello, young man. What's your name?" I go by Sonny, because he's got an African name. And I said, "What do you do?" "I'm a rising junior in mechanical engineering, and I'm smarter than my brother." Hell yeah, I like that. And his father is beaming, and the father's working 2 jobs. And as is appropriate, you don't ask about the spouse. But I wanted to know about his spouse. But he is just proud as a peacock. That's the immigration that I envision. And I just came from Sioux Center, Iowa last night. The town is booming. It's full of democratic principles. They've got drop-off childcare. This is a place that went 86% for Trump. That's a mere cosmetic number, because they do democratic programs big time. High tax rate, high social services quotient, and a high acceptance to immigration. And consequently, there's nothing boarded up in that town. It's cooking. Sioux Center has a higher GDP than Lamar's, and Lamar's is 5,000 more people, and it has wells. Sioux County, the whole damn county, has more manufacturing jobs than Woodbury County, and Woodbury County is 3 times bigger. They have this facade of being Democrats. It's Chuck Grassley's approval rating, which is at 47. 6% of them are Democrats, registered Democrats. And another 8% are registered independents that have habitually voted for them. That's my target audience. We knock on every Dem door once, Republican door twice, independent door thrice, and just talk. So I'm a little bedraggled because we're on the road, but we're going to do it again tomorrow. Tomorrow morning we go to Alamakea County, which is yonder, and work our way back. And then we rinse and repeat. That's what it takes. And in the course of doing that, we have fundraisers like this, and I thank you all from the bottom of my heart for making this worthwhile. And you should know that in our campaign, we have a really professional staff. And we've hired what could be described as old professionals. Old is a relative term. People like JD, Julie Stouch, who is my age, and other people who are of age and have got 5 or 6, 8, 10 campaigns underneath them. And so we are trotting along, not making mistakes, spending our money wisely, and doing, I think, what's the right thing. Yes, sir.
If elected to the Senate, would you support maintaining the filibuster?
The question is, would you support holding to the filibuster? The custom of the filibuster. All right. So we maintained the filibuster because we thought there was a level of overbearance that a party could do to the other party. Okay, it was pardon the gender-specific term, but it was considered a gentleman's agreement. There's a level of unfairness in the Senate where 1/3 of the senators represent 2/3 of the population. Those are almost all Democrats. So there's an element of unfairness in the standing of the Senate as it is. Of course, the House doesn't do this. So if we're thinking that let's maintain that because we want to maintain a fairness, it's already an organization ruled by the minority. So let's forgo it. And I don't like to throw disheveling actions off a cuff. I've thought long and hard about this. And I believe Ted Kennedy would say, be careful, Franken. But I believe Tom Harkin would say, in my day we said, let's vote at 60 and then let's vote again 2 weeks later at 57 and then 54 and then 51. But if you asked him today, he would say, to hell with it. Go with a simple majority and be done. Because it's been too long that we've had a minority rule. We truly has been too long. And there are things being held up. And the fact that we're holding up substantial bits of legislation means Democrats are getting the wrongly described, as you heard Herm say, all the great things that this president has done, wrongly castigated as not getting anything done. And that's wrong. But we can get a lot more done without that doggone filibuster. So let's set it aside and move out. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about women's health care. And you mentioned women in the military have other opportunities for health care than women outside of the military. And with the recent change in Roe, if a woman is in the military and in a state that isn't supporting abortion rights or women's health care rights, she has to abide by the state that she's in. But if she happens to be in Germany or Italy or some other country that allows women's health care, she would have different opportunities. So I'd really like to hear your impression on how women's health care for those in the military, which you're so familiar with, and how that can be level set for all of us.
Sure. So it's not only so the question has to do with women's reproductive health care options. And in the military, how do you deal with it from state to state? I'm going to paraphrase. But I will also add in another group of individuals, and that's females and men who are in overseas diplomatic posts. So that's also, I mean, I'm very close to the diplomatic side because as my career has progressed, I became closer and closer to the diplomatic and the international Red Cross, Red Crescent elements because it's a whole of activity for security, and it should be viewed as such. I think your supposition that women in the military in a state that negate abortion are no longer permitted for that surgical activity, I think that's incorrect. In the military, it's considered a federal facility, and that option holds supreme regardless of the state. We amp state.
Okay, so how can people that are non-military receive those same benefits then? Apparently I read something incorrectly on perhaps the Newsline. So how do you see it going forward so that all women have the same, and men?
In the military or?
Civilian women.
Oh, well, I think Kansas has been indicative. You know, Kansas, that ballot measure was brought in a Republican-rich ballot with the thought that only Republicans would get engaged, and yet it was defeated substantially, double digits. And I hate to compare us to Kansas. And so I mean, I got to pause to think about that. But Iowa has changed, and it's not, you know, Iowa was the place that educated George Washington Carver. It was the place that was 85 years in advance of Brown versus the Board of Education. It's the place that said, we don't care what you do in the bedroom. It was, or who you marry, as long as you're happy. It's the place that we really got on the stick for rural electrification because we wanted literacy to be central. I grew up an hour each way on a gravel road just on a school bus in a high school that was in the 99th percentile. This is Iowa. So I would expect what we're going to see in Iowa is, even with this Republican-rich Supreme Court, a series of lawsuits that are going to freeze what our state legislature does, or they're going to have a sensibility that's going to say, ooh, we've perhaps overstretched ourselves. Now, that's all speculation. As to how I see it going in the country, I would codify Roe, just as Herm mentioned. Just be done with it. And there's a series of items that should be first up. But one of the overarching considerations of my candidacy is, if you ask me, what's the #1 issue concerning Iowans? No one's asked me that. And we've hit a lot of rural Iowa. It's the dissension that separates us. #1. Families, I mean, this brings tears in people's eyes, where this has caused breakups in relationships. This has caused divorces. This has caused split bedroom situations. This is a significant issue, and much of it is manufactured. And the media manipulation, I was involved, I headed up the high technology task force as a civilian, pro bono, for the Trump administration. I had 18 of this nation's finest minds with full spectrum cyber, space, media manipulation, animation, critical infrastructure reduction, chemical biological issues. How does a small entity disrupt a nation? Think Fox News. And it's rather appalling how this can be done and how easy it can be done. And we're seeing the effects of many of those measures today. Russian malevolence in our elections, the Alex Jones nonsense, the talk radio in western Iowa, even some of the pulpits in this state. Admit it, folks. It's uncomfortable, and the separation of church and state's not there, and the oddities of how to curate your audience is 100% there. And it's a sad statement. I anticipate that it's that sea change. We've walked into the valley of darkness, and it's time to emerge. And one of them is, as Democrats, we speak from a position of strength. Stay on message, be kind, get out of your comfort zone, gather people around, and bring people together. In the end, we've got 93 days to win this election. Santa.
One quick one. Is your Republican scout here tonight? I'm checking my list.
Which one? I have 4.
Did I serve one of them tonight? I'm just curious.
No, they're not here. They're not here. I didn't invite them. All 4, I'm 100% positive will vote for me. One has recently quit, and her betrothed did the duties for 2 of my stops today. And he's going to teach at Dordt College. And he hugged me when he saw me today, and we chatted, because there's an issue with his religion. He's not Christian Reform, and he's got a problem. This is a funny story. So he asked me my advice, so that's another story. Okay, one more, says Sophia. Please. No, not 2. Please, someone else.
Well, sweetheart, wait, this young lady, she is a young college student.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
And she is working on your behalf to get the word out.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, so, you know, one of the best questions that was asked of me in the last 4 days of being on the road, preceded by another 4 days on the road, etc., was done by a 9-year-old girl who asked about international security affairs and Putin and ICC issues, etc., and I was like, whoa. So, please, do you have a question?
How can youth get involved in politics? I feel like a lot of youth are getting really apathetic recently. What's your plan to kind of get more youth involved in your
So the question is, how do you get the youth involved? There's an element of apathy. I do believe that the Roe decision by the Supreme Court did not energize those under the age of 30 to the extent that I expected. I don't think they quite realize the implications of this. Many are not in a situation where this may come to stare them at this point, but they should get engaged. We have a youth organizer. We're developing our college outreach. I believe that I have staff members that are doing a good job of keeping me in my perspective with the very necessary Snapchats and Instagrams and the like, and we need to do more with that. We're hiring another person to specifically work on that, and he is a person of color, and he's much engaged in this element. He's also a urbanite who has rural roots, and he's also somewhat of a polyglot. Okay, and he came to us. When a staff member comes to the Franken campaign and says, I'd like to work for you, here's my resume, etc., we never ask them what their political affiliation is. Do you know that? So, happy to have you. Although my trackers, I'm not so sure I'll hire them. Okay, we can do one more, Sophia. Anything else?
How about gun control?
Guns. Okay, firearms. First of all, firearms to me, as a kid growing up in rural Iowa, a rifle, a shotgun, etc., was much like a tool. And when I wanted to go do something, etc., one of my first paychecks had to do with using a .22. My mom made a sling so I could carry it. My history in firearms goes way back. Nobody in the political realm and the NRA will gunsplain me ever on firearms, ever. The firearms that unfortunately have been used in Uvalde and Buffalo, New York, etc., in Las Vegas, those are the same firearms I would have been very comfortable with walking around Ramadi in 2006. It's crazy. And the difficult spots in the world that I've been responsible for, Somalia, Eritrea, Ethiopia, into the Arab Peninsula, northern Pakistan, etc., these places, Mali, Libya. None of those countries hold the distinction of America, where the #1 cause of school-aged children are firearms. Only in America. What is wrong with us? What is wrong with us that we've got a nation with 410 million firearms? More than one for every person. What's wrong with us that we've got carrying laws that are not screened by anybody? Why is it that you can walk into Hy-Vee and not understand what that person who's carrying that pistol with 14 rounds in it, what that person's qualification was? I'm 100% about owner responsibility for firearms. We're not going to get rid of firearms in society in America, but we can certainly ensure the owners stepping forward, and even some in past, that they're responsible gun owners. And today, so you know, America somewhat has a criminal perspective in firearms. We are the exporter of firearms to the criminal elements in Canada and Mexico. We have factories now for ghost guns. Did you know that? Factories with employees lined up, mass producing ghost guns, selling to, not out of the trunk of your car, that's too pedestrian, out of organizations. This is America. The NRA and the gun lobbies and their acolytes have created an undercurrent of criminality that makes police scared. Being scared is a human emotion generated by intellect and understanding and senses and instinct. They have every reason to be feared. And now it's used as a throttle on Democrats for the increase in gun violence. It's the only category where violence is increasing in America. All the other crime is going down. Only gunfire. And this is the domain of the Republicans. Categorically speaking, I know of no Democrat that's talking about defunding the police or that we ought to have firearms in every home. Do you realize that in Asheville, North Carolina, they passed an ordinance to put AR-15s in schools with ammunition and magazines just in case somebody might need that firearm to shoot some errant citizen down. This is crazy talk. Absolute crazy talk. I will be the hardest, most vocal defender of sensible gun rights in the Senate. That I guarantee. And you know, there's an element of bravery associated with this. I'm happy to shoulder that bravery. I will call out my cohorts. I will, you know, in this world, in this work, just so you know, this is Ames. You're a pretty progressive place. You're a smart group. Unless you're okay to show the mortuary pictures and put them underneath the windshield wipers of Grassley staffers, unless you're willing to put that on a billboard, unless you're willing to put that autopsy in a newspaper and an ad that says no organs of this 6-year-old were redeemable for transplant. None. Not even the retinas. Then if you're not willing to do that, then you're going to slowly lose this battle. Because this is an existential threat to our society. And I think the foreign students that attend Iowa State are going to become fewer. And yes, the mom and dads, why that is, we're fearful for Iowa. We're fearful to the United States. You people are out of control. And you know what? I'm not going to disagree. Jordan and I lived in Stuttgart, Germany, a town of 2.3 million for 2 years. There had 3 murders. Des Moines, I think, is at 12 so far this year. And that's a safe city. What the hell's wrong with us? Do I need to go on this? Probably not. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. This is a aspirational, inspirational, as I finish that conversation, campaign. People want hope. They want change. They want somebody who puts nation, state, people, human dignity, human rights above party politics, party sniping. They want to engage the young, that next generation. They want to ensure the elder generation has a comfortable and long-lasting retirement. And we want to live together in a reasonable, humanistic way. Happy to be that person to lead you in the U.S. Senate. Thank you.